Sometimes changing people's worldviews can bring about interesting results. I'm here this week to talk to you about apologetics and how to defend the Christian faith. Something else that I write about and sometimes speak on when I'm around the country is the Christian approach to ethics, and in particular socio-political ethics. We really believe that there's a continuum, in all of the material that you're being presented this week. You're going to hear some things about culture and society and constitutional law. You're going to hear some things about evolution. You're going to hear some things about philosophy. And we believe that all these things run together. In fact, the better they run together, the more consistency there is between them. That means the better we've grasped the Christian worldview revealed to us by God in the Scriptures. So we do hope there's a great deal of consistency. But anyway, down on the other end of things, away from science and philosophy to where the rubber hits the road and making application, we believe that our cultures are going to be reformed by the Word of God. Sometimes when we take Christianity into another culture, we see monumental changes come about. I think particularly the change that was made in one of the colonies of Africa, been renamed over and over again since the early days, but when the missionaries went in there, you had a group of people there in deepest, darkest Africa, as we used to say, that were governed tyrannically by a chieftain. And when you would do something contrary to the wishes of the chieftain, there's the threat that you might die, that you might have a spear put right through you because he was in a bad mood. Well, as a change of culture came about, a change of outlook and morality with the influx of Christianity, that chieftain, as he was getting older and so forth, realized that this, what we would call form of government, I don't know if they would put it exactly that way, but he realized that this way of governing those who were in the tribe with him was just not right. And so after a period of re-education and so forth, that tribe eventually got rid of what we would politely call monarchy. It was really a despotism. And I think the chieftain was very happy that his culture had made this kind of change. He was an old man. He was going into retirement. They would now be governed by a tribe council, a form of constitutional democracy, and he was no longer going to be the king, as we would put it. But what do you do with that throne that was the symbol of that chieftain's power and so forth? He couldn't bear the idea of destroying it or throwing it away, so forth. He wanted to keep it around, not so much as a reminder of the bad old days, but, he had sat on that throne for a long time. It was something important to him. And so what he decided to do is that he would put that up in what we would call the rafter area of the hut that he lived in. He had a huge hut, very nice, so forth, made out of grass and so forth, but he stowed his throne up there. And sadly, one night, because these buildings were not well made, in a windstorm, the throne came down and crushed him to death. So a lot of people wonder about the changes that missionaries bring, with them. We see what happened in Hawaii. Women started wearing muumuus and so forth. And over here in Africa, you see these changes brought. And here's this poor old man who had such good intentions for his people being killed by this throne that fell on him. But some good came out of that anyway. Because it's because of that particular instance that we now have, as almost a proverb in our own culture, that saying that says, those who live in grass houses shouldn't stow thrones. You can clap, that's okay, you can clap, that's right. Thank you. What do I have, like a magician, what do you think you see here? Fooled you. Okay, what is this? Wrong. John Lofton. Wrong. This is my umbrella. If you had come across this as an artifact out on the ground somewhere and done all the scientific research and analysis possible, would you have come up with the conclusion that this was an umbrella, even a primitive umbrella? No, because you can't evaluate things without assumptions and presuppositions, and if you bring the wrong presuppositions, you're going to come up with the wrong conclusions. I mean, you've learned that much today, haven't you? This doesn't look like an umbrella. It works pretty well in an Atlanta cloudburst when these guys from Southern California forget their umbrella. They say, what do you need an umbrella in summer for? It's ridiculous. Well, you're going to Atlanta. Anyway, this is my umbrella, but I'm going to make better use of it during this lecture. Out in Southern California, you go see a TV show taped. You probably don't realize this because when you see the television show, you just see what's up on stage. But they prompt the audiences out there to give the proper response. I always thought that would be a real downer to a comedian to have to tell people when to laugh. You know, you're something of a failure if you've got to explain that. But anyway, they have prompters, you know, and they'll come out. Sometimes they're electronic, and sometimes they'll just hold up something that says applause now, or cheer, or, you know, yell obscenities, or whatever they do. And I'm going to try that with you as well. Not many of you are from my area of the country, but I think you can catch on. You're a smart group. We're going to use this as though it's a prompter, and I want you to pretend that I have written on it the word bogus. Okay? And so from time to time, we're going to run into things as we talk about philosophy and worldviews, and you're going to be thinking to yourself, bogus. And so I'm going to walk over and I'm going to help you. You know, just so you know that you're thinking the right things, I'm going to hold up the prompter, and we're all together going to say, bogus. Oh, you got to do better than that. All right, now with some enthusiasm, like you're really upset about it. Bogus! That's right, okay, good. Now we can do some philosophy. Not yet. You gotta wait till I say something that's bogus, and then you can do it. Yesterday we spent some time. Why are we laughing? What did I do now? That is, wait a minute, wait. That's right, okay. I tried to explain that I can only use a blackboard. I have not come into the 20th century yet. Is this better? Okay. Would anybody else like to give this lecture, for crying out loud? Hey, I know how to turn it back on. Don't make fun of me. Does everyone see an F up there on the board? That's because that's what you get so far for treating me this way. Yesterday, we studied for 2 hours the concept of faith. And one of the things I was trying to accomplish, you can't see that, okay. One of the things I was trying to accomplish yesterday is to explain to you that Christian faith is not some kind of mindless leap, some kind of emotional experience or a volitional commitment contrary to good reason or contrary to the facts or contrary to logic. I wanted you to get very firmly in mind that as Christians we don't turn off the brain when we start exercising our religious commitments and when we witness to people. We don't live in two worlds. The world of reason when we go to school and the world of faith when we become religious or on Sundays. Faith is not something contrary to reason. In fact, by the end of this week, I hope I will have convinced you, or for many of you, illustrated even better than you knew before, that faith is foundational for reasoning. Rather than being reason on one hand and faith on the other, I believe that faith is the foundation for reason. Today, you have heard from a number of people about the faith known as evolution. And here I use the word faith in the old-fashioned way. Are you not, I mean, even if you knew this before, are you not impressed at the way in which evolutionists hold on tenaciously to a theory which is, to be very honest with you, asinine? I'm sorry to speak, so strong. Well, I'm not so sorry to speak strongly, but you have to understand, every once in a while, there's got to be that little boy who stands on the side of the parade and says, pardon me, but isn't the king naked? you know, we're putting on this grand display, but, you know, for all I can see, this guy is in his underwear. And that's really what you're going to have to be willing to do as a Christian when you go off to school. You're going to hear these sorts of things, and you will not even have people, be careful, they're getting angry here. You will not even have people have the honesty to say to you, well, this is one way of looking at it, and there's a lot of problems, and we're working on those problems. We think we're going to get them solved. They're not going to tell you they have problems. They're going to put on the parade, they're going to lay it all out there, and you're going to be sitting there going, wait a minute, doesn't this theory, isn't it in its underwear or worse? I mean, come on. You really expect me to believe this? You want me to believe that inorganic material became organic. Life came from non-life. Bogus. I'm sorry, but you know, if you just want me to take that on faith, then you're really acting like what you think Christians do all the time. They just go to Sunday school and they hear these little stories about miracles and so forth, and they go, oh, we believe this. It makes me feel so good. Why should you believe something like this? Now, do you have the guts, the intellectual, personal, whatever it takes to think for yourself and to say, squeeze me, I think that is not right. Give me a break. We not only have to understand what faith is and who really exercises mindless faith, we have to understand something about facts as well. And that's what I want to talk to you about this afternoon. Facts. You've heard a lot of facts. And I don't want to suggest that you have really two things going on in our conference. Those who come and give you the facts, and then us philosophers who come along later and just make fun of that and say the facts aren't important. The facts are important. I believe all the facts help us out. So if you decide to go off to college, become a biologist, become some kind of natural scientist, and study, you know, the natural world so we can see the support it gives to the Scriptures, God bless you. We need people like that. We need people like Dr. Hodges. And though it may have surprised you that a lawyer knew so much about science, we need people like Wendell Bird and others who can argue the facts. Because as long as the unbelieving world gets by, you know, free of charge, saying, well, those Christians, they just had their Sunday school faith and so forth, then people are not going to be willing to listen to us when we get down to what's really at stake, and that's the philosophical worldview that underlies your approach to the facts. So I want you to study the facts. I want these people to be there, but I also don't want you to be misled. I want you to understand the real place facts have. You've already learned the place facts have when it comes down to theorizing about the origin of the universe or the origin of life or the origin of man himself. Have the facts or lack thereof stopped evolutionists from promoting their point of view? Now, do you think that's because they're all a bunch of dweebs and they just sit around saying, oh, let's lie to people? They get together, you know, and over Coke, what they say is, well, I could tell this lie, you know, and I could really deceive my... No. Oh, well, I guess maybe sometimes. The evil that's in the heart of man doesn't preclude that as a possibility. But I don't know that. I've never overheard evolutionists sitting around plotting explicitly and self-consciously to lie to people. See, here's the tragic thing. They believe this stuff. They not only lay it out there, they think that's right. And they think the facts support them. So we have to talk about facts and just how important they are. I'm going to give you some facts here. I didn't know they were going to talk about the age of the universe, so they kind of stole my thunder. This is not really what I specialize in. So I brought a little brochure that gives them from a friend of mine, Robert Morey, entitled, Just How Old is the Universe? He has a quotation at the back of his pamphlet, which is interesting. From 1982, a scientist who said, the age of our globe is presently thought to be some 4.5 billion years based on radio decay rates of uranium and thorium. Such confirmation may be short-lived, as nature is not to be discovered quite so easily. there has been in recent years the horrible realization that radio decay rates are not as constant as previously thought, nor are they immune to environmental influences. And this could mean that the atomic clocks are reset during some global disaster, and events which brought the Mesozoic to a close may not be 65 million years ago, but rather within the age and memory of man. Because here's somebody who has the honesty to say, hey, these clocks that we're using to date the universe may not be that reliable. Now, what reliable clocks do we have? You've heard a little bit about that. Let me just give a few illustrations, but then I want to make a point about how this factual material is usable. It takes about 1,000 years to produce 1 inch of topsoil by the forces of erosion, such as wind and rain. You know what topsoil is? It's usable soil to a farmer, if I can put it that way. And it takes about 1,000 years through the forces of wind and rain to create 1 inch of topsoil. Now, if the Earth is billions of years old, the pamphlet says, and the process by which topsoil is created has been functioning all that time, there should be a thick layer of topsoil on Earth's crust. You understand? That after years and years and years, billions of years, there's going to be topsoil created through all the wind and rain and so forth. There should be a rather thick layer of topsoil on Earth's crust. Do you know what the average depth of topsoil is around the world right now? 6 to 9 inches of topsoil is the average. Now, how can that be if the Earth has been here, as we've been told, billions of years? Oh, but then, you see, here you present a fact to an evolutionist, and you say, you know, there's just not enough time on planet Earth for all these weird things to happen. All those, you know, unlikely, chance, random events to take place so that life could develop and so forth. And he says, well, that's just your Sunday school faith. You say, oh, no. I mean, the topsoil is only 6 to 9 inches deep around the world. There should be miles of topsoil after billions of years. Now, do you think at that point the scientist says, it's like, you know, the lights start going off. Conflicting evidence, I've got to give up my theory. Forget evolution. No, he sits there and very calmly comes up with what we call, in scholarly circles, a rescuing device. No, we don't really call it that, I do. That's what he's doing. He wants to rescue his theory, and so he comes up with a device for dealing with this fact that seems contrary to his theory. And so he'll do something like this. He'll say, oh, well, all that topsoil that you're talking about, you dweeb, you Christian, you think you know so much. Actually, there's something else going on in the world. That topsoil is washing into the ocean. And just like down here at lunchtime, you saw all that topsoil washing onto the stairs and so forth during the rainstorm. That's been going on, and the soil's been washing into the ocean. Well, but if the Earth is billions of years old, and the erosion rate has been steady, and of such a degree where all the topsoil is going to now have to be washed into the ocean to leave only 6 to 9 inches, the bottom of the ocean should be miles deep, shouldn't it, in loose soil. The sediment on the ocean floor has been found to be at its thickest 1/2 mile. At its thickest. The depth can only explain, the depth of the sediment can only explain thousands of years of soil washing into the ocean, not billions of years. We have the same sorts of problems when we think about moon dust. You know, people, these are not just somehow harebrained ideas on a piece of paper. When we first sent astronauts, you know, to the moon, you guys were just being born about that time, is my guess. Is that right? Roughly in that period? 1969? Well, back then, yeah, the class of 69. Great. Bogus. Back then, they were so convinced by their evolutionary assumptions that there would be all this, you know, cosmic filtering dust and so forth on the moon, that the spacecraft might actually sink into the dust, not be able to get up off the floor again, or maybe consume it. And so when the astronauts went down off the ladder, I mean, they didn't sink that far in, they had huge shoes and so forth, and we had developed ways to save them in case it was going to be a quicksand kind of situation, but it wasn't. Turned out that the, see if I can give you the details here. I thought it was here. Oh, there was 1/4 of an inch of dust on the surface of the moon, rather than, you know, feet and miles and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm not going to spend all afternoon giving you more of the scientific data. I promise to be philosophical. But what's the point? When we bring out these scientific facts, do you often see people just fall down dead in front of the facts and say, that's it, there goes my theory, I've got to give it up? No, you don't. You find them move from one rescuing device to another rescuing device to another rescuing device, and not just will they run from one device to another to save themselves the embarrassment in front of the facts, quote unquote. You will find they start using things which we don't consider legitimate tools in scholarly circles at all. They'll start intimidating. You say, oh, no, teachers would never do that. Give me a break. Yes, they will. They will pretend they know more than you. They will say they've read the footnotes, you haven't, which is shorthand for saying they've got a lot more research than you do. And they'll say, when you get into the field and know more about it, then you won't ask silly, naive questions like that. And then they'll walk home or into their car and drive home, and they're going to say, whew, got away from that one. They'll use intimidation. They will, in fact, sometimes grade you down because you have what used to be called an open mind and you want to ask good, critical questions. You don't think they will? What did you just hear today? Didn't Dr. Hodges tell you about a man who had written something that was supposed to be favorable to the evolutionary hypothesis? He got a worldwide reputation for this book. He was a tenured professor at San Francisco State, I think. And what happened? They couldn't get rid of him politically, but when he changed to a creationist point of view, they cut off his funding. Now, in different departments at the university, they have different ways of dealing with people they can't get rid of, but they don't want to have there. Now, I'll give you an example. In my own experience, I was a philosophy PhD candidate at USC. And this has nothing to do with Christianity. It was one of these intramural, fights between the unbelievers, who, by the way, don't get along very well with each other. They don't like competing schools of thought. And it was well known that there was a tenured professor there at SC who most of the other faculty had no use for. And when they couldn't get rid of him in what we might call the more garden variety ways, what they started doing is assigning him 730 classes with freshmen. Now you have to understand, because most of you are in that general age group, that you might say, yeah, well, let's party. Wouldn't that be great? No. Among those who are tenured professors, it's considered not a great compliment to have to teach the early morning classes, much less to be assigned the freshmen. We send graduate students to do that. But they put this professor, without graduate student help, on what is the low end of the totem pole of teaching, so that they might do what? So they might discourage him, they might insult him, whatever it takes, so that he would, of his own, look for a job somewhere else. Now, I saw this happen in my own experience, and I knew the man. He's very competent in the field that he teaches. I don't happen to like his personality either. I can understand why people wanted to get rid of him, but he knew his stuff. So you might think, well, if the guy knows the facts, he's mastered the field, then personalities and politics don't enter into this. Can you imagine a person losing his professorial standing or being persecuted just because people don't like what he's teaching? Oh, how un-American. How unacademic. It happens. It happens all the time. And it especially happens when what you are holding to is not just a contrary school of thought, but a religious school of thought that is disdained. The facts do not determine what people will believe. I know you're going to have to make some changes about your view of human nature. That's not a very flattering thing to say, but I'm really convinced that it's true. Let me see if I can illustrate this a bit more for you. Get it out of the religious domain again. I don't happen to like Oliver Stone. To be real honest with you. He and I don't see eye to eye on very much at all. And I don't like his personality either. It's not like, you know, he's like a charming unbeliever and I can understand where you're coming from. No, I think he's really a jerk. Sorry, but I'm just being honest with you. You don't have to go out there and tell him. You know, Oliver and I will talk this out someday, I'm sure. I don't like him. I don't like his point of view. But I'm very pleased with what he did in bringing out this film, JFK. Okay? The film was really challenging to people. Yes, I know that he put together imaginary reconstructions and film clippage that was more or less eyeball factual stuff. I know that sometimes he overdid it in terms of his own particular disdain for the Vietnam War and tried to play that in a way which doesn't seem balanced or accurate to those of us who lived through the period and so forth. I realize the kind of man he is. But I also am very grateful for this, that because he put out there, even in an overdrawn way, he put out there the difficulty with the Warren Commission report and its reconstruction of how JFK was killed. There are a lot of people in our country today who realize that it isn't such a cut and dry thing as to have some prestigious group of people get together, look at the facts, boil them down, summarize, and hand it to us on a platter. It doesn't happen that way, ever. And this just happens to be a notorious illustration. To be very honest with you, I was no supporter of JFK. I did not appreciate his politics. I don't particularly like his family or the values of his family and so forth. But I am, as an American, of course, appalled that the man who was elected President of the United States was killed by somebody. And I think it is valuable to find the right people and punish them for what they did, if we haven't already done so. I don't want to prejudice that. But be very honest with you, as much as I have those feelings, they're way down on the list in terms of what's important to me. You know, I have a lot more other things that I'd like to see accomplished during my lifetime than the discovery of who actually killed the president. Although if they find who actually did, or maybe they already have found who actually did, then that'll be fine too. So you know where I'm coming at? I don't have a lot of emotional investment in this sort of thing. And I'll tell you why then I like Oliver Stone's movie and why it's caused people to think. Because it is a fantastic illustration of something I want to get across in my teaching of philosophy. People do not believe things because the facts demand that they believe them. Facts don't resolve conflicts very usually. And when the facts resolve conflicts, you'll notice that the conflict is always a very small order, limited domain kind of controversy that doesn't have a lot of implications, where people are going to have to change their lives or way of seeing things. You and I may have a disagreement as to how much it costs to get a Whopper down here at the Burger King. But if you and I have that disagreement, let's say we're over at the rec room tonight watching the Olympics and we get into, a heated discussion of this. Whopper's $1.49 down there. Can you believe that? It's no $1.49. You geek. It's $1.29. Is not. Yes, it is. Is not. Yes, it is. And we get into a really intelligent conversation about this. Now, someone here who has some advanced training in philosophy might come along and rescue us. He might say, hey, listen, why don't we knock off this childish stuff and get up there and walk down to the Burger King and we'll just all look up there and see what it cost. Why didn't I think of that? And we walk down there and we use eyeball inspection and there's 3 of us and we all see Dr. Bahnsen was right all along. You knew I would be. Now, there's an example of a disagreement resolved by an inspection of the facts, right? But now stop and think to yourself. What were we arguing over? Something of earth-shaking importance, great philosophical significance? My life going to be ruined if I'm wrong about the price of a Whopper at Burger King? I mean, I may act like that, in the way that I'm arguing, getting emotional and overdoing it. But no, it doesn't have a whole lot of implication. You see, we share most everything else in terms of what the nature of life is and how good Whoppers may or may not be. We share all these other things and we just disagree over something internal to our way of looking at the world. And since that's the nature of the disagreement, it's low level, not highly emotional, not greatly significant for changing life, then we can go and look at the facts, and for the most part, we can resolve things by doing that. But you know, when we're talking about what is the nature of life, whether we're going to answer to a holy God someday, whether this universe is eternal or created by God, the deity of Christ, whether homosexuality is an alternative lifestyle, and on and on and on. We talk about things like that. We're not talking about the price of Whoppers at Burger King. We're talking about high-level, emotional stakes here. Because people are going to have to change their lives. They're going to have to see the world differently. And when it comes to those sorts of things, the facts don't move people. Now you might be sitting there saying, well, they should. Okay. They should. Now that we've granted that, let's get on with the real world. They don't. And they don't even in a case like who killed JFK. That's not what I consider a high-level philosophical issue. But some people, I don't know, either out of their adulation for the president or their hatred of the administration, or in Oliver Stone's case, obsession with the Vietnam War, some people find that really important. And the amazing thing is they cannot sit down at a table and bring all their documents and evidence and say, okay, we're here for the duration. We're going to look at all this and we're going to come to a common conclusion. They can't do it. Why can't they do it? Because the facts don't speak for themselves. The way in which you see the facts, in fact, what you take to be a fact, is determined by your underlying assumptions. And you'll never become good debaters, whether you want to publicly debate like Dr. Bahnsen does, or whether you just want to be able to do it internally. You'll never become good debaters if you don't realize that. People are not swayed by the facts. Although their initial assumptions or their changed minds can be reinforced by the facts, you put a fact out there on the table and it doesn't change underlying philosophical commitments. Say, well, Dr. Bahnsen, you're not talking about important enough facts. Let's take some big ones. How about miracles? Miracles change people's minds. I'm saying, oh, is that right? Have you read the Old Testament? How many here have read the book of Exodus? Be honest. Okay, so then you know what I'm talking about, right? Let's just take the children of Israel as an example. What happened in Egypt before they left? Well, God did a series of miracles. He plagued the Egyptians. And let's just let the early plagues go. We'll just say, okay, they were just warm-ups. Right? They really weren't. They were amazing, the way in which they were well-placed philosophical attacks upon the Egyptian way of looking at life. But let that go. What was the last plague? The firstborn died on a particular night. All the firstborn, except those who happened to do this superstitious little thing of putting the blood of a lamb on their doorpost. I mean, what would you think if you were an Israelite and you saw that happen? All of the mourning, in the morning, the Egyptians have lost. Now, it's not like a plague that indiscriminately goes through and kills a number of people, or all the children, or sometimes the youngest and sometimes the oldest. It was like a magic bullet, as we say. God sent the angel of death in and killed specifically the oldest son in that night, all at one time, and spared the Israelites. That a pretty good miracle? It's outrageous as a miracle. It's just incredible. And so the Israelites knew what God could do. They had not only seen the previous plagues, they saw this grand miracle. And so the Egyptians, of course, finally said, then get out of here. We don't want you here. You're a real blight on our society. The Israelites say, thank you. Would you give us your jewelry? We're out of here. And so they take off. Well, I mean, that was the Bahnsen paraphrase. There are other things in there. Anyway, they got out to the Red Sea, right? And they can't get across the Red Sea, so they can go to the Promised Land. But it's worse than that, because they turn around and they see that Pharaoh and the Egyptians have changed their minds. And they say, no, wait a minute, we want you to come back. So Pharaoh sends out his chariots and his horsemen and his best soldiers, and they're pursuing the Israelites. Now, do miracles change people's minds? You would think, well, obviously, the Israelites thinking if God could send the magic bullet into into Egypt and kill the firstborn and spare our children. God controls the entire universe. Who cares that the Egyptians are pursuing us? No problem. Instead, they railed upon Moses. What a good job you did, Moses. You brought us out here to die. We're going to be ambushed here. We can't get across the sea. We're boxed in, and here comes the army to slaughter us. Now, did the facts, even the miraculous facts, change their worldview? Change their hearts? Change their way of doing things and thinking? Not at all. But God was gracious. And He gives Moses the instructions for parting the Red Sea. Now, is that a miracle or what? The Red Sea opens up, and I want you to take account of a couple things because you get sleazy explanations of this Red Sea opening. You know, it's kind of like what you have here is the Reed Sea. It was at low ebb, and the wind blew all night, and the water was, real low, and the people could get across. Oh, yeah. Except that when Pharaoh and his army pursued them, and God brought the walls of water in on them, they drowned. I don't know many armies that would drown in 3 inches of water. I mean, that's pitiful if that's true. Not only that, the Bible tells us they didn't walk across upon sloshy, muddy soil. They walked across on dry ground. God opened up the sea, walls of water on the side. I can imagine the Israelite children walking through, looking at the fish, just like at SeaWorld, Walls of water on the side, on dry ground, they get to the other side, and then, of course, just the randomness of the universe, as you know, the sea comes in upon Pharaoh as he says, hey, we can take the same route. Boom, they go into the sea, and they're killed. Now you're an Israelite. You're on the other side of the Red Sea. You've seen God kill the firstborn. You've seen Him kill Pharaoh and his armies in the Red Sea. 2 grand miracles, not to mention the warm-up miracles ahead of that time. You've seen miracle upon miracle. And you know now that God is in control of all things. He will take care of you. You can trust Him. Isn't that what you read in your Bibles? No. That's right. No, got the wrong Bible out, because what I read in my Bible is that the next time the Israelites had a problem, they complained again against Moses. In fact, by the time you get to Exodus 17, he's been challenged 3 more times, and now they're ready to kill him. Moses complains to God. He says, they're about ready to kill me, God. What shall I do with these people? And I'd love to preach the rest of the book to you because it shows us the gospel very wondrously. But right now, my point is just to illustrate for you that when you have miracles, they do not change people's philosophies. Facts don't do it. Let's imagine that I'm talking to a naturalist, a physicist, who doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in miracles, and so I start hammering at him with evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and there is considerable historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is very comforting to me, it reaffirms my faith, it strengthens it, I'm glad that evidence is there, but I keep throwing the facts, you see, at this naturalist, and I keep ripping them in there, Boom, what do you do with that? Oh, what do you do with that? And here's this guy, he's just reeling. And finally he says, okay. I don't know what to make of it. Historically, it does look like you'd have to grant that this man, Jesus of Nazareth, came back to life. And now I think, okay, I've got him, finally. Now he's going to have to become a Christian. Now he's going to have to change his lifestyle. Now he's going to have to own up to the sovereign of heaven and bow the knee to the Lord. And what he says is, strange things happen in this universe. One of these days, we'll be able to explain it. I threw the facts at him, but you see, since he did not change his underlying philosophy, every time he got one of those facts, he just threw it over his shoulder into what was for him a bottomless pit for facts. Okay, I can take in any fact. He might say, send it to Ripley's Believe It or Not. Strange things happen. Dead man rises. Whoa. We even have TV shows that specialize in that kind of thing. Where's the National Enquirer when you need them? Is that the right way to respond to the resurrection of Jesus Christ? No. It's not just the wrong way, it's dead wrong. Spiritually dead wrong. But you see what my point is? Because he was spiritually dead, he was not going to see the facts for what they were. Now, most people, you will not get that far with just simply throwing the facts at them. I was using that as an illustration. Most people will not accept that it is a fact. Their philosophy says, no, that can't be. That doesn't fit into my worldview, so it can't be a fact. They'll bat it down, bat it down, bat it down. But even when people are willing to accept the pitch, you throw the best evidence you've got at them, they're going to be able to take it and say, big deal, big deal, big deal. And the reason for that is because they haven't changed their philosophy. They haven't changed their mental outlook. Or to put it in fancier terms, they haven't changed their presuppositions. They saw the world in a particular way, they have been interpreting it in that way, and all you've given them is more grist for their mills to interpret the world in that way. They see the world in a naturalistic light, you throw miracles at them, and they try to give you a naturalistic explanation of the miracle. Now you might, again, be thinking, well, but they shouldn't do that. And I have to talk to you now. I've really not tried to make this too heavy this hour, but just give me the 5 minutes I have left, the 2 minutes I have left to talk philosophical with you. When people will not accept the evidence for what you say that it is, and you're right, by the way, and they will not accept the evidence as proving what you think it proves, they are well within their intellectual rights not to do so. Now listen to that sentence closely. And I'm saying they're within their spiritual rights, nor am I saying that they're right. I'm saying they're within their intellectual rights. If you do nothing more but give them more grist for their mills, and then they use the mills on the grist, you can't blame them for that. If you haven't challenged their philosophy of life, why should they think their philosophy of life has been challenged? Because their philosophy of life can accommodate the facts just like your philosophy of life can accommodate the facts. We happen to believe as Christians, and I am sure that we are right, that people have to work overtime to miss the significance of the facts and what they tell us about God and about the truth of the Bible. They have to work really hard. But I want to tell you that within their philosophical system, they are intellectually in their rights to just treat it that way. We need to do something more than address the facts. We need to go after the philosophy by which people accept facts and interpret facts. And there's one piece of good news, and then we'll take some questions here. I would think, if I were where you all are, listening to the lectures you've heard today, you might be a little discouraged. I don't want you to be discouraged, but I could understand that you would be. I've made it something of a hobby horse of mine to study this stuff about evolution, and so it was real interesting to me, and a lot of nice reminders of the evidence that we can throw at unbelievers and so forth. But if I put myself into the shoes of a 19 or 20-year-old sitting there, you must be just intimidated by how much you'd have to learn to argue about evolution. Some of you can do it. Most of you should do at least some of it. I'm not going to call you off from that. But I want to encourage you. When you realize that when all is said and done, it's not the facts that are going to make the difference, then I can teach you a method of reasoning by which, with just a little bit of ammunition, you can take on anybody who comes. That's the title of my lectures this week, the Christian worldview defended against all comers. And so take heart. I don't want you to not study the facts, but I want you to know that if you learn a method of reasoning, whatever facts you have, you'll be able to put to good use in defending the faith.